Ho, ho, ho!
Hello, I'm Chris, and this is a shit you could have Googled in 30 seconds holiday special, Beyond the Krampus. The winter solstice is the shortest day and the longest night of the year, and societies around the world have recognized it through various celebrations and ceremonies, going back thousands and thousands of years. The Hopi of northern Arizona would celebrate by kindling fires, dancing, and gift-giving. In Iran, the festival of Shab Yalda includes burning fires to keep evil at bay and reading poetry while feasting on nuts and pomegranates. Ancient Romans would celebrate Saturnalia, dedicated to the god of agriculture and time, and during this raucous affair of drinking and gambling, the masters would serve their slaves a feast as thanks. A Japanese solstice practice involves warm baths scented by citrus as bonfires on Mount Fuji beckon the return of the sun. And Christianity celebrates Christmas, a celebration that combines their religious tale of the birth of Christ with the incorporation of Western pagan traditions. Indeed, the Christmas tree comes to us via Yule, a celebration of Odin by the Germanic people. Saint Nick is even speculated to be tied to the role Odin would fill as the god of wishes, astride his eight-legged flying horse, long white beard blowing in the wind. Due to its pagan roots and annual tradition of masked debauchery, Christmas was even banned by the Puritans from 1659 to 1681. But by the latter 19th century, the pagan and the holy had merged into the Christmas traditions we see today. Clement Moore cemented the Americanized spin on Christmas with his 1823 poem, A Visit from St. Nicholas, which introduced us to our rosy-cheeked reverse burglar Santa Claus. But Christmas, and indeed the solstice, is not an exclusively American tradition. There are dozens of holiday spirits, monsters, and legends around the world that we've lost touch with. So let's fly our proverbial sleigh of inquiry around the world and see just what creeps in the Yuletide shadows. Most famous of the holiday horrors would be the Krampus of Central Europe, recently featured in film and popular enough to be found on sweaters, stockings, and ornaments. Sometimes referred to as the Christmas Devil, he did have a somewhat demonic appearance, although he has no ties to Satan or religion at all. He wasn't an adversary to St. Nicholas. He was a partner, splitting the duties of reward and punishment. Appearing as a black anthropomorphic goat with a long red tongue and a basket on his back, he would dole out beatings with birch switches and carry some of the misbehaving children away to eat for his Christmas dinner. On December 5th, known as Krampusnacht, locals can still be seen dressed up in terrifying costumes and running along the alpine countryside with pitchforks and demanding booze from strangers. Such Krampus runs continue to this day. In recent years, Krampus has broken into the American market with the LA Krampus Ball featuring the band Krampstein, a Krampus-themed Rammstein tribute band. The concept of an anti-Santa doesn't end there. France brings us the tale of Hans Trapp. Legend has it that he was a wealthy and evil man that was excommunicated from the Catholic Church for Satan worship. His wealth was confiscated and he was exiled to the forest, where he went mad and became obsessed with cannibalism. He built a shack of sticks and stuffed his clothing with straw, posing as a scarecrow in hopes of luring a stray child close enough to eat. When he finally stalked, killed, and butchered a 10-year-old boy, God struck him dead with a lightning bolt before he could take a bite. He still serves as a boogeyman, his ghost returning through windows to visit young children before Christmas, terrifying them into obedience. Another French boogeyman of the holidays is found with Père Fouettard, not so subtly translated as Father Whipper. He began as an evil butcher who lured 3 boys into his shop with poisoned sweets, where he and his wife killed them and salted their corpses. St. Nicholas came to the rescue, resurrecting the boys and taking the butcher into custody. Pressed into the eternal service of St. Nicholas, his job is to accompany him on Christmas, dispensing coal and floggings to those on the naughty list. The extra bad ones would go into a cage, taken back to become his stew. A German variation on the holiday boogeyman is Knecht Ruprecht. His origins are unclear, with some tellings making him a simple farmhand, while others state that he was a feral child discovered and raised by Santa. He is depicted in a long dark robe and carrying a stick and a bag of ashes. Accompanying Santa on his travels, he would ask children if they pray. If they did, he may bequeath gingerbread and chocolate upon them, but if they did not, then he would whack them with his stick and his sack of ashes. The worst children would be tied up in a sack and thrown into an icy river to drown. Fun fact, in the German broadcasts of The Simpsons, their pet greyhound, named Santa's Little Helper in the States, is called Knecht Ruprecht. Heads up, this next entry is pretty offensive. You may want to skip ahead about a minute and a half or until the little warning light goes out. The Netherlands is home to Sinterklaas. Based on St. Nicholas, he is a painfully thin figure with a red and white bishop's robe and hat that carries a red book of naughty and nice. He is said to live in Spain, but travels to the Netherlands by steamboat before riding a horse throughout the country, asking children what they want for Christmas. But the unsavory part of this tale surrounds his helper, Zwarte Piet. Translated as Black Peter, he is a black man brought along to threaten the children, with the worst being abducted back to Spain as slaves. Zwarte Piet was sometimes depicted by a singular black man in 16th century attire and a feathered cap, or alternately as a group of 6 to 8 helpers, each with specific duties such as gifts, navigation, or climbing the roof. Although the earliest versions of Piet were as a black chained devil, a 19th century schoolteacher reinterpreted the tale as a frizzy-haired Negro servant. And that's the version that unfortunately stuck to this day. He remains a controversial character, being widely depicted in parades and celebrations by the use of blackface, even today. If you are in Switzerland or Austria during the 12 days of Christmas, then you'll find your holiday wishes at the whim of Frau Perchta. Originating as an alpine goddess of nature, she is obsessed with cleanliness and good manners. Sometimes depicted as a beautiful goddess or sometimes as an old hag, she would usually have 1 foot larger than the other, a sign of a shapeshifter. Flanked by Stregel, horned beasts who assist with punishment, she would judge the children, but she could be kept at bay if you baked ritual cakes in her honor and appeased the Stregel with offerings of leftover food. If she was pleased by the cleanliness of your home, she would leave a silver coin in your shoe. But if she found you disobedient, then she would slit you open, disemboweling you to replace your organs with straw, rocks, and garbage. She would stitch you back up to be found dead in the morning. The Belsnickel is another German creation who also creeps into houses in the winter. Wearing tattered clothing and fur, he comes alone or is sometimes accompanied by the Krampus, where he will reward with treats or beat with switches. In the 19th century, rowdy revelers would go Belsnickeling, getting drunk, vandalizing, and playing pranks. He actually survived the trip to the Americas, where he is still a part of Pennsylvania Dutch customs, and was even portrayed by Dwight Schrute in The Office. An old Icelandic myth tells of Grýla, an ogress that kidnaps and devours disobedient children. But her connection to Christmas would come later with her offspring, the Jólasveinar. The Jólasveinar, or Yule Lads, are 13 trolls that terrorize misbehaving children during the holidays, sometimes going as far as eating them. They were accompanied by Jólakötturinn, the Yule Cat, a giant cat that preyed on children and adults alike. The Yule Cat did not care if you were naughty or nice. It could only be kept at bay by new clothing. If you had received new clothes, a sign that you had worked hard that year, then the Yule Cat would not eat you. Alternatively, and to inspire generosity, if a child gave new clothing to someone in need, then they too would be spared his feline appetite. The horrific tales of the Yule Lads would become more terrifying with every version, until a 1746 decree banned the foolish custom of scaring children with the Yuletide lads and ghosts. They received a modern makeover in the 20th century, being demoted to mere tricksters. Their colorful names would denote their purpose, with window peeper, watching you through the windows, door slammer, banging doors shut at all hours of the night, and sausage swiper, stealing all of the sausages. Pot scraper, bowl licker, and spoon licker seem harmless enough, but one has to wonder about Sheepcoat Claude, who fancied sheep a lot. In any case, they became mere shadows of the villains they once were. In 1932, Icelandic author Jóhannes Erkoltlum codified the Jólasveinar in poetry, and in 1987 that same poem became one of Björk's early recordings. Although the concept of punishment seems pervasive with Christmas mythologies, not every tale is one of switches and suffering. There is the Merry Ljóð, a horse skeleton seeking rap battles for booze. This Welsh tradition goes back over 200 years, manifesting as a horse skull mounted on a stick and decorated with ribbons and ornaments. An early variation on drunken caroling, wassailers would carry the decorated skull before them, hiding under a white cloth and going from door to door. If the homeowner answers the door, they have officially accepted the gauntlet that was thrown down, and the Merry Ljóð will exchange rhyming insults back and forth with the homeowner until one or the other admits defeat. If the zombie horse wins the diss track throwdown, then the revelers would be invited inside for cider and refreshments. La Befana may look intimidating, riding her broomstick in the night, but she's just a sweetheart. An Italian legend, she lived in a small village on the night of Christ's birth. The three wise men traveled through her village on the way to the manger, and as they passed through, everyone ran to accompany them on the journey, all but one. She claimed to be too busy with housework and promised to join them later. The next day, she realized the importance of that journey and ran after them, clutching gifts in her broom, but the Magi were long gone. In her remorse, she would go forth every year on her broom, delivering all of the gifts she never got to give the Christ child to good girls and boys. Indeed, her name, Befana, is Greek for Epiphany, with the Feast of the Epiphany celebrated on January 6th, the same night that she flies forth on her mission. The Kalakansaroi are a group of demons that live underground, sawing through the tree of life that runs through the earth, at least according to Greek lore. In December, when only a single thread of the tree is left holding it together, the demons would be compelled to spill out onto the surface world for the 12 days of Christmas. They would cause mischief and mayhem and demand piggyback rides, but their true objective was to steal any child born during those 12 days and take them back to become one of their own. You could protect your newborn by wrapping them in straw and garlic, or by putting a colander outside your door. They have a natural compulsion to count the holes in the colander, but because the number 3 is holy in Greece, and they, as infernal beings, cannot count it, they would be forced to start over again and again until the 12 days had passed and they returned underground. By the time they returned, the tree of life had grown back, and they would start sawing anew. Turkey brings us the Karakonkalos, Sasquatch-like demons that lurk at street corners with riddles for passers-by, sometimes disguising their voice to lure victims closer. Should the accosted person answer their riddle correctly, including the word black in the answer for strangely arbitrary reasons, then they are free to continue along their way. If they answer incorrectly or mention the wrong color, then the Karakonkalos will strike them dead with a single blow. Finland is famous as the happiest country in the world, with its northern lights, gender equality, strong educational system, and what I assume is the happiest black metal in the world, so it may come as a surprise that the Finnish take on Santa Claus is anything but. Nutipuki, the New Year buck, would go door to door demanding gifts and leftovers from the Yuletide celebrations. Otherwise, he would terrorize the livestock, trash the garden, and abuse the servants. Now, although one might easily dismiss this as a drunk vandal wearing a fur cloak and horns, blackmailing their way into free food, there was a legitimate reason to yield to his demands. The Yuletide celebrations were thought to attract the spirits of the dead, and the presence of the Nuttipukki would chase away any unwanted spirits. The Finnish Santa, Jólakötturinn, is a blend of the old traditions and the modern Santa, although in some areas of Finland, the Nuttipukki still make visits. Speaking of Scandinavia, we have another entry, the Swedish Julblock. Known also as the Yule Goat, he would accompany Santa in delivering gifts on Christmas night. His is another obvious nod to the pagan Norse roots of Christmas tradition, with Thor's chariot being pulled by two immortal goats which would be slain for food and brought back to life every day. This relates directly to the Yule sacrifice, in which a person wearing goat skins would be symbolically slaughtered and resurrected. In the 1600s, the Julebok was said to be roaming the streets, demanding offerings and scaring the Christians. Later, he would be reframed in the Santa mythology as an assistant, distributing gifts to children. Today, the Julebok lives on in effigy, with the town of Jalvla erecting a giant straw goat every year. In an insurmountable failure of foresight, they never once considered that erecting a giant pagan straw goat in town would ever result in arson, which has now happened 37 times in the past 53 years. Somewhere, Loki is laughing. Last but not least, we come to Ded Moroz, or Grandfather Frost, Russia's answer to Santa Claus. He looked very similar with his white beard, red or blue cloaks, and a troika pulled by 3 horses. He carries a pike staff of silver or crystal and has an estate in Veliki Ustjug. According to Slavic mythology, Morozko was known as a snow demon to some and a powerful hero that chains water with his iron frosts to others. Morozko would kidnap children, ransoming them for gifts from the parents. When the Orthodox Church came along, they morphed Ded Moroz into a magical figure that gives gifts instead. In 1917, in a newly secular Soviet Union, he was banned as a symbol of religion, viewed as a bourgeois god of children. Stalin would later resurrect Ded Moroz, but moved his holiday to New Year's Eve, a non-religious holiday. Stalin also made his coat blue, so as not to be confused with the red-coated, Coca-Cola drinking capitalist pig Santa Claus. He also made certain that Moroz was a muscled example of masculinity instead of rotund and jolly. His speeches would place all thanks in Stalin, a piece of propaganda aimed at children. He knew anytime you missed the factory quota, he tapped your phones and he would leave gifts when you did well, to also indicate that he could access your home at any time should you disobey. He was accompanied in his travels by his granddaughter, Snegurochka, the Snow Maiden. She is depicted with long silver blue robes and a furry cap. Her tale is one of tragedy. Born the daughter of spring and winter, she was adopted by human parents. Forbidden to love, she was held indoors, away from the world she wanted to be a part of. Eventually, the pull of the world becomes unbearable and she flees to find love in the arms of a human man, only to turn into ice and then melt into nothing. Men, am I right? I want to thank everyone for watching, and if you enjoyed this video, please hit like and subscribe if you aren't already a subscriber. You'll find the resources and links for this video in the description.